Sarah Miller had always believed that life settled down once you crossed 30. You stopped chasing excitement. You stopped waiting for surprises. And you built routines strong enough to quiet anything unexpected. That was exactly why she loved her weekends at the small lakeside cabin in Montana. No noise, no big emotions, just quiet mornings, warm blankets, and the steady peace she'd been craving since her last heartbreak 2 years ago. But that Friday afternoon didn't follow her plan. The sky was bright. The air smelled like pine, and Sarah was finishing her grocery unpacking when her phone buzzed. It was her best friend, Emily. "Sarah, I know this is sudden," Emily said breathlessly, "but my cousin Ethan got stuck on his trip. He has nowhere to stay until Sunday. Could he stay at your cabin for the weekend? He's responsible. Really sweet. You'll barely notice him." Sarah hesitated. She hadn't hosted anyone in months. The cabin was her escape, not a place she shared with strangers. But Emily rarely asked for favors, and Sarah trusted her. "All right," she said, "tell him to come." 20 minutes later, a silver rideshare car pulled into the driveway. Sarah stepped outside, expecting someone shy, maybe quiet, maybe older. Someone who would blend into the background and not interrupt her peaceful weekend. But when the door opened, she froze. A young man stepped out tall, relaxed, carrying a backpack and a polite smile. His eyes were warm, his posture confident in a gentle way, and something about him felt unexpectedly alive. He looked like someone who believed in possibility, someone untouched by the tiredness she carried. "Hi," he said with an easy tone. "You must be Sarah." "I'm Ethan." His voice held sincerity, not arrogance. She shook his hand, trying not to look surprised. "Welcome," she said, pushing down the sudden awareness she felt. "Come in. Hope the trip wasn't too rough." "Not at all," he said. "Emily told me this place is beautiful. She undersold it." He glanced around as if the trees, lake, and porch were pieces of a world he had never seen before. The way he appreciated simple things instantly softened something inside her, inside the cabin. Sarah showed him the guest room. Ethan placed his bag by the bed and gave a grateful smile. "Thanks again," he said. "I know it was last minute." "It's fine," she replied, trying to sound casual. "I'm usually here alone, so company might be different. Good, different, I hope." He asked lightly. She didn't answer that. Instead, she went to the kitchen to make them some tea. She needed space to collect herself. 1 minute into this weekend, and she could already feel her routine cracking open. When they sat on the porch, the sun was dipping behind the trees. The lake reflected orange and gold. Ethan leaned back in his chair and let out a breath of appreciation. "This place feels like a reset button," he said. "I didn't realize how much I needed that." Sarah felt a small pull in her chest. She hadn't expected him to speak so openly. Most people his age, well, the age she assumed he was, didn't share feelings so icily. "How old are you, Ethan?" she asked before she could stop herself. He laughed softly. 23. "And before you panic, I promise I'm not here to turn your life upside down." She almost choked on her tea. "I'm not panicking," she said too quickly. He smiled but didn't push. Instead, he asked about the cabin, her favorite seasons here, her family's history with the place. He listened closely, not in a forced polite way, but with genuine interest. It had been a long time since anyone listened to her like that. As the evening cooled, their conversation drifted to movies. Ethan was studying film in Vancouver and shared stories about his projects, struggles, and the excitement he felt when he captured something meaningful on camera. Sarah found herself leaning in, drawn to the passion in his voice. "You talk about film like it's magic," she said. "Sometimes it is," he answered. "It's like freezing a feeling into a frame. Makes moments last longer." Something about that line stayed with her. Later, when they moved inside, Sarah made a simple dinner. Ethan insisted on helping, passing her ingredients, setting plates, wiping the counter. He moved through the kitchen naturally, not trying to impress, simply being present. She noticed his kindness, his patience, the way he paid attention without demanding anything in return. After dinner, they sat by the fireplace. The crackling wood filled the room with a warm glow. Sarah hadn't shared this space with anyone since her breakup, and she felt strangely exposed. Not in a romantic way, but in a human way, a reminder that connection could still find her. Even when she wasn't looking for it, Ethan watched the flames thoughtfully. "This place feels like somewhere people come to heal," he said softly. Sarah stiffened slightly. "Why do you say that?" He shrugged lightly. "Just a feeling. There's calm here, and you seem like someone who needed calm." She was caught off guard by how gently he said it, no judgment. Just understanding. For a moment, Sarah wondered how someone so young could see her so clearly. She pushed the thought aside quickly. She wasn't about to start slipping into fantasies just because a polite, younger man crossed her path. But even as she dismissed the idea, her heart felt a small warmth she hadn't felt in years. Something new. Something uncertain. The night grew deeper, and they finally said goodnight. Sarah lay in her bed staring at the wooden ceiling. Listening to the quiet, she tried to convince herself that the strange feelings humming under her skin were nothing, temporary, just the effect of unexpected company. But deep down, she knew that the calm weekend she planned had already changed direction. Ethan wasn't loud or disruptive, yet his presence carried a softness that nudged open a door she thought she'd locked forever. She didn't know his full story. She didn't know why his eyes held that quiet depth. She didn't know why he seemed familiar in a way she couldn't explain. What she did know was this: something in the air had shifted. Something in her heart had too. And although she didn't understand it yet, Sarah sensed that this weekend wasn't going to be like any other. It was going to mean something. Something she wasn't ready for. Something she could no longer ignore. The next morning began with a quiet brightness that felt unusual to Sarah. Normally, she woke to silence and slow routines, but today she heard soft noise coming from the kitchen. Curious, she slipped out of bed and walked down the hallway. The smell of scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh coffee filled the air. For a moment she stood at the doorway, watching Ethan move around the kitchen with easy confidence. He looked up, surprised. "Oh, good morning. I hope it's okay that I started breakfast?" Sarah blinked, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to anyone taking care of things in her cabin. "You didn't have to do all this." He shrugged lightly. "You opened your home for me." Making breakfast felt fair. The simple gesture warmed her more than she expected. She sat at the table, still waking up, while Ethan poured her coffee. He didn't hover or act overly sure of himself. He treated her with a natural respect that made the morning feel calm as they ate. Their conversation flowed easily. Ethan shared stories about film school, long nights editing, projects that went wrong, and the small victories that made him feel alive. Sarah listened, drawn by the energy in his voice. She admired how passionate he was about his work. He talked about creating meaning, capturing emotions, finding stories hidden in everyday life. "What about you?" he asked gently. "What do you enjoy besides this cabin?" The question caught her off guard. She lived a structured life, work, errands, quiet evenings, but she hadn't talked about her dreams in a long time. "I used to paint," she said, "before life got busy." Ethan smiled softly. "Then life should make space for it again." Sarah didn't answer. She wasn't used to someone encouraging her like that. Most people her age spoke about responsibilities and caution. Ethan spoke about possibilities. The contrast unsettled here in a good way. Later that morning, they walked down to the lake. The sky was clear, the water calm. Sunlight danced across the surface like small diamonds. Sarah had seen this view 1,000 times, but somehow it felt new with Ethan beside her. He asked questions effortlessly. Nothing intrusive, just curious. "What made you choose this place as your escape? When did you last do something just for yourself? What do you want your life to look like?" Each question pushed her to think about things she had avoided. She answered slowly, choosing honesty even when it felt uncomfortable. Ethan didn't judge, didn't give advice she didn't need. He listened, genuinely interested. At one point he said, You talk like someone who built walls to protect herself, but forgot where the door is." Sarah looked away, surprised by how accurately he saw her. She didn't know whether to laugh or deny it. "And you talk like someone who believes walls don't matter," she replied. He tilted his head. "Sometimes they do, but sometimes they just keep good moments out." That sentence settled in her mind long after they walked back to the cabin. The rest of the afternoon passed in simple activities tidying the cabin, preparing snacks, sitting on the porch. But even in silence, something between them felt alive. Like there was more being said in the spaces between words. Sarah tried to distract herself, focusing on chores she didn't need to do. But every time she looked up, Ethan was there, calm, patient, thoughtful. Not demanding attention, but somehow commanding it by just being himself. That evening, the weather cooled and they decided to light a fire outside. The orange glow spread across the darkening yard, casting soft shadows on their faces. They sat on opposite sides of the fire pit, close enough to feel the warmth, far enough to keep the moment safe. Ethan poked the fire gently. "Do you ever think about second chances?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. "Sometimes, but I'm not sure they always come." "Sometimes they do," he said, looking at her. "They just don't always look like what we expect." She felt the weight of his gaze. Something inside her shifted, an understanding she wasn't prepared for. He wasn't flirting or pushing. He was simply expressing something honest, something that felt deeper than interest, something more like recognition. "You're young, Ethan," she said softly, trying to lighten the tension. "And you're older," he replied calmly. "Age doesn't stop people from connecting. Only fear does." The fire crackled between them, filling the silence. The moment felt charged, but gentle. Like they were standing near a door neither of them had opened yet. Sarah looked into the flames, trying to steady her thoughts. She reminded herself that she barely knew him. He was only here for a weekend. She shouldn't be feeling this, whatever it was. But her heart, quiet for so long, felt awake. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "I'm not trying to make anything complicated," he said. "I just think some people cross paths for a reason." His words were soft, but they settled heavily in her chest before she could respond. A knock on the cabin door echoed through the night. Both of them turned toward the porch, startled. The peaceful evening cracked open like glass. "Expecting someone?" Ethan asked. "No," she murmured, rising to her feet. The knock came again, firm. This time, as Sarah approached the door, her pulse quickened. Something about the sound felt familiar. Uneasy, she opened it and froze. Standing there was Michael, the man she once loved. The man who walked out of her life 2 years earlier without giving her the closure she needed. His presence hit her like a wave she wasn't ready for. "Sarah," he said, surprised to see her. I was in the area. I saw your car and thought maybe we could talk." The shock of seeing him made her voice stumble. "Michael, why are you here?" Ethan appeared quietly behind her, staying back but making sure she wasn't alone. Michael glanced at Ethan, confusion shifting into a raised brow. "Am I interrupting something?" Sarah felt heat rise in her chest, anger, discomfort, confusion all mixing at once, and the peaceful connection she was exploring shattered in a heartbeat. Everything that had been soft and calm became tense and uncertain. But inside her, one thing was clear. This moment would change the entire weekend. Sarah stood frozen at the door, unable to process the sight in front of her. Michael, the man who walked away from her life 2 years ago without warning or reason, was standing on her porch like he belonged there. His expression carried a mixture of surprise and hope, but Sarah felt none of that. All she felt was the familiar sting of old wounds she had worked so hard to forget. "Sarah," he said again, his voice lowered this time. "I didn't expect to see you here." "This is my family cabin," she replied, forcing her voice steady. "What are you doing in Montana?" Michael shifted awkwardly. "I'm here for a work conference. I drove by and saw your car. I thought maybe we could talk." Talk. The word felt heavy. Too heavy. Sarah wasn't sure she wanted to open any old conversations, especially not during a weekend. She had finally begun to feel alive again. Before she could respond, she sensed Ethan behind her. He didn't step too close, didn't interfere, but his presence was grounding, like a silent reminder that she wasn't alone in this moment. Michael's eyes flickered toward him. "And you have company." The judgment in his voice was unmistakable. Sarah straightened slightly, suddenly protective not of herself, but of the calm she had found in the last 24 hours. "This is Ethan," she said. "He's staying for the weekend." Michael's gaze sharpened, taking in Ethan's age, his easy posture, his calm expression. "A weekend guest," he repeated, his tone sliding towards something unpleasant. Ethan remained polite. "Just visiting. Don't worry, I'm not here to complicate anything." But Sarah felt the underlying tension. Michael wasn't the jealous type before, yet here he was, acting as if he had the right to question her life. "Michael, if you came here to talk, then talk," Sarah said, stepping outside and closing the screen door so Ethan wouldn't feel pressured. "But don't make assumptions about my choices." Michael looked caught between apology and frustration. "I'm not trying to start anything. Seeing you as someone younger." Sarah cut him off. "Stop! He's a guest. And my personal life is not something you get to comment on." Michael exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're right. I'm sorry. I came because I've been thinking about us. About how things ended." Sarah felt a familiar ache stir in her chest. Part of her once wanted this conversation, wanted clarity, closure, anything. But now it felt strangely late, like a letter delivered years after it was needed. "What do you want to say?" she asked quietly. Michael hesitated. "I shouldn't have left the way I did. I was overwhelmed, scared, dealing with things I didn't know how to explain. I shut down instead of trying. I regret that. I regret losing you." Sarah stared at him, stunned by this sudden honesty. It felt unreal hearing this from the man who once refused to talk about emotions at all. "I've changed," he continued. "I'm trying to be better. And seeing you just now made me realize I should have said all this a long time ago." His words were soft, sincere, but they didn't hit her the way they used to. The old pain was still faintly there, but the longing was gone. Before she could respond, the cabin door opened quietly. Ethan stepped out, holding 2 mugs of tea. He paused, noticing the emotional tension, then handed 1 mug to Sarah. "I made you chamomile," he said gently. "Didn't know what was happening, but it seemed like you might need it." His voice was soothing, grounded, respectful. He didn't insert himself into the conversation, just offered comfort and stepped aside. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do. With the tea, Michael watched the interaction with careful eyes. "So this is more than a guest, isn't it?" Sarah inhaled sharply. "Michael, stop trying to define something you don't understand." "Do you understand it?" he asked, not unkindly, more like he was confused. Her heartbeat quickened. She didn't understand it fully. She didn't know what she felt for Ethan yet. But she knew what she no longer felt for Michael Hope. The old door had closed long before he knocked. "I think we're done here," she said softly. "I appreciate the apology, truly, but I'm not in the same place anymore." Michael looked down, defeated. "So that's it. Honestly, it was over a long time ago." He nodded slowly, accepting the truth he didn't want to hear. "I'm sorry, Sarah, for everything." "Thank you," she said sincerely. "But it's time to let the past stay in the past." With one final glance at Ethan, who stood respectfully at a distance, Michael walked back to his car. The engine rumbled, headlights swept across the trees. And then he was gone. When the silence settled, Sarah finally exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath the entire time. Ethan stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though her emotions were tangled. "I think so. I just didn't expect to face him like that." Ethan didn't force her to talk. He simply walked with her back to the porch. They sat down side by side, watching the moon reflect on the lake. After a quiet moment, Sarah said, "You didn't have to step outside earlier. You could have stayed inside." "I thought you needed space," Ethan said. "Sometimes the best way to support someone is to give them room." His answer touched her more than it should have. Michael always tried to fix things, control things. Ethan simply understood. "You're very thoughtful for someone your age," she said, without meaning to. Ethan smiled softly. Age doesn't control maturity. Some people grow through years. Others grow through experiences. Sarah looked at him, seeing something deeper in his eyes, something rooted, calm, honest. She whispered, "Today made me realize something." "What's that?" he asked. "That my past doesn't fit anymore. Not in my life. Not in this cabin. Not anywhere." Ethan turned toward her, his tone warm but cautious. "And your future. Does that feel clearer or more confusing now?" "Both," she admitted. "But maybe that's okay." Their hands rested between them, not touching, but close enough that she felt a quiet pull. The space between them felt charged not with fear, but with possibility. The moonlight cast a soft glow over his face. Sarah saw how patient he was, how he never pushed, never rushed, never assumed. It made her heart feel something gentle, something new. For the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel broken. She didn't feel old. She didn't feel hesitant. She felt alive, completely and unexpectedly alive. And deep down, she knew this moment, this quiet night beside Ethan, had changed something inside her. Something big. Something irreversible. Something she wasn't ready to name yet. But the truth lingered gently in her heart. The past had left. And the future was finally knocking. Sunday morning arrived with the softest light Sarah had seen all weekend. The sky was pale, the lake calm, and the air smelled faintly of pine and fresh dew. The weekend she had imagined as quiet and safe had turned into something she hadn't. Expected mixture of emotions she wasn't prepared to face. Sitting at the kitchen table, she watched Ethan quietly move about packing his bag. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with unspoken words. "I should get going soon," he said, breaking the quiet. His voice was calm but carried a hint of reluctance. "I don't want to overstay my welcome." Sarah felt a pang in her chest she hadn't anticipated. All weekend, she had told herself to stay composed, to keep perspective, to not get swept away by fleeting moments. But now, seeing him leave, the weight of the past 2 days pressed in. She wanted to ask him to stay, to prolong this fragile connection, but the words stuck in her throat. "You're in a hurry to leave?" she asked lightly, trying to mask the flutter in her chest. He shook his head, smiling softly. "Not really. I just want to make sure I don't impose. You have your life here, and I have mine." Sarah looked down at her hands. His thoughtfulness, patience, and quiet maturity made her heart ache. She remembered the first morning he had made her tea, conversations by the fire, the walks along the lake, moments simple yet profound. They had slipped past her defenses gently, without force, without expectation. She stood up and walked him to the porch. The wooden planks creaked beneath her feet. The same boards that had held their conversations, their laughter, and the quiet pauses where words weren't needed. She stopped halfway, suddenly unsure of what to say. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft and unsteady. "Thank you." "For this weekend? For the cabin?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "Not just the cabin. For everything. For being here, for listening, for making me feel alive again." Ethan's eyes softened, and he took a small step closer, careful not to overstep boundaries. "Sarah, this weekend didn't confuse me. It clarified everything." Her heart skipped. The words were simple, but their weight was enormous. She had spent 2 days exploring feelings she thought were long gone, feelings she didn't expect to resurface. She realized she had grown accustomed to being alone, too quiet, to the safety of routines, but Ethan had disrupted that in the gentlest possible way. "I don't know what this is," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper, or where it could go. "But I can't pretend it didn't mean something." He nodded slowly, understanding. I'm not asking for promises, Sarah. I just want you to know. Whatever you felt this weekend, whatever we shared, it meant something to me too. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the hesitation that usually held her back. His calm, grounded presence offered a security she hadn't realized she'd missed. She felt drawn to him, not in a reckless way, but in a way that promised trust, respect, and possibility. The car that would take him back to the airport pulled into the driveway, the engine low and distant. Ethan glanced at it, then back at her, as if measuring how much time remained. He didn't rush her, didn't demand a decision, and that restraint made the moment more intimate than words could convey. If we ever explore this, Sarah whispered, we have to go at the right pace. I can't. I won't rush feelings, even if they surprise me. Ethan smiled a gentle, understanding smile. I wouldn't want it any other way. They stood in silence for a moment, letting the lake, the morning sun, and the cabin witness their emotions. Every corner of the place held memories of the weekend, laughter over small jokes, conversations that touched her soul, moments of quiet reflection that had drawn them closer without force or expectation. Finally, Ethan picked up his bag. He paused at the edge of the porch, turning back to look at her one last time. Sarah, whatever happens from here, I want you to know this. Meeting you wasn't random. This weekend, it clarified everything for me, and I'm willing to wait for whatever pace you need. The sincerity in his voice, the depth in his eyes, struck her in a way she didn't anticipate. For years she had believed that love, attraction, and connection were things that either happened instantly or didn't happen at all. This weekend had shown her that it could be slow, quiet, still deeply meaningful. Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Not sadness, not fear, but relief. Relief that someone could see her, understand her, and respect her boundaries while still offering warmth and care. Relief that the past, painful as it was, didn't define her anymore. Relief that the future could hold something new, unexpected, and gentle. Ethan finally walked to the car. He paused at the driver's side, then turned once more. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, no words were needed. The weekend had shifted something profound inside them both. As he drove away, Sarah stayed on the porch watching the car disappear down the tree-lined road. The lake reflected the morning sun, shimmering in golds and silvers. She inhaled deeply, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. Her heart felt fragile yet alive, full of hope yet tempered by reality. The weekend was over, but what it had started was just beginning. She had faced the past in Michael's unexpected arrival. She had acknowledged feelings she didn't know she still carried. And she had discovered a connection with Ethan that felt honest, respectful, and real. The path ahead was uncertain, but it no longer frightened her. Instead, it felt full of possibility. For the first time in a long time, Sarah realized that life didn't have to be planned to be meaningful. Sometimes the people who enter your life unexpectedly leave the most lasting impact. And sometimes age didn't matter, timing didn't matter, connection, respect, and emotional honesty mattered more than anything. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sunlight warm her face. She smiled softly, feeling a quiet confidence she hadn't felt in years. This weekend had changed everything, not just in her heart, but in the way she viewed life, love, and herself. And deep down, she knew that whatever came next with Ethan, or even the lessons from the weekend alone, she would embrace it fully. She would not let fear hold her back. She would welcome the future with open arms, ready for new beginnings, new feelings, and the quiet, steady thrill of something genuine and heartfelt. The porch felt warmer now, the cabin brighter. The lake shimmered like a mirror to new possibilities. And in that soft morning light, Tara understood that endings were only the start of something else, something richer, deeper, and entirely worth the risk. The weekend had ended, but everything had truly begun.